Why? Why, if God created man in his own image, did he not want him to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why would he give him dominion over all of the birds of the air, over the fish of the sea, over the beasts of the field? Why would he set him in the garden to rule above all the creatures and the plants, and then tell him not to eat of that fruit? The argument that the serpent would use on Adam and Eve was that if they ate that forbidden fruit of this tree that was at the center of the garden, they would be like God himself. Ancient Gnostics, they shared in that view, believing that biting into that fruit, it freed men from their Creator in their own enlightenment, in their own wisdom and their own knowledge, rather than binding them in captivity to the devil. Perhaps here, though, it's important to understand the nature of Satan. John the Evangelist writes of that very nature in the book of Revelations, as he says, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." The great deceiver, Satan, tricks his victims with great promises, telling them that they can be like God. Whether it is when he convinces mankind that God does not exist, as he so often does, or he deceives them into believing that a bite of a fruit will make them like God, the lie is always the same. It is forever the same. Mankind needs only their own enlightenment, only their own wisdom, only their own knowledge, rather than the truth of the Lord and his righteousness. It has been the lie that he has foisted upon people since the beginning of time itself.
Had God intended for mankind to have no free will, he would have never created Adam and Eve in his own image, with their own spirit. He would have made them with no soul, with no capacity to grow or to grasp even the simplest of concepts. They would have no ability to appreciate or to recognize anything but that which he had told them. In that, he would have created empty, hollow vessels, empty, hollow shells that would have a similar characteristic to a statue of stone, with eyes that could not see, and ears that could not hear, and lips that could not speak. That, though, was the image of idols, of false gods, not the image of the Creator in all of his glory and wonder. Yet that free will, it would prove to be both a blessing and a curse for mankind. For though it gave them the capacity to comprehend and to understand, though it gave them the capacity to learn and to distinguish, it also gave them the ability to fall amidst their own wisdom. It gave them the capacity to make a wrong choice amidst their own limited understanding of the world around them. In it, one could turn from the grace of God and from his wisdom, finding that their free will had become the instrument of their fall. Knowledge is the same way. Though it can offer enlightenment and wisdom, it can also open a person to thoughts and to notions that they had never before imagined in all of their lives. This was what God had hoped to spare his new creation from. Not enlightenment and truth, for in truth and in love, in enlightenment and in wisdom, he created them. He had hoped to shelter them from the inevitability of hurt that would come from certain knowledge that they would be open to in partaking of the fruit of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was what God had hoped to protect them from, and what the serpent would ensnare them with. And the serpent said unto woman, Ye shall not surely die, For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Forbidding them to eat of this fruit, God never told them that they would be as he was. He never told them that on that day they would become like him. That would be the deception of the devil. It would be the great deception of Satan as the serpent tricked them into taking that first bite, telling them not that they might fall, but rather saying unto them that they might be closer to God by becoming like God. How did he know, though, that it would work? Because with those legions of angels that fell with him as he led his uprising against the Lord God Almighty, it was the same. He promised that they would be like God. He promised that they could be like gods as he led them into open rebellion against the Lord. The same deception he used to gain his followers in heaven, he used against God's new creation in the Garden of Eden. By taking that bite from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, mankind openly rebelled against God. Yet what they were offered wasn't the wisdom and the enlightenment that would make them like God. They already had the knowledge of good that God was, for they had seen it from the hand of God as he created them. They saw it from his hand as he provided unto them all that they could want and need amidst this world. All then that was left to them was to know evil. And with that evil, death would enter into this world, as through their disobedience they brought about their own mortality. That, though, would be the part that the serpent would leave out, failing to tell them the entirety of what they needed to know before they made their decision. Sin would, by this singular act, enter into the world. In Adam, all would be sinful and all would die, given to a frailty that God had never intended for them, their souls blemished by iniquity as they became like scarlet, even from the time of their birth. Corruption, contrary to the nature of God, would enter into this temporal existence as it would become a part of the nature of man, for not of the Spirit, but of the flesh, and given to the temperament of it. Separating themselves from God, creating that spiritual divide between themselves and him, they could no longer live in perfection, for they had forsaken perfection by their acts. The basic character and the integrity of that image that they had been created in had been forever altered by that forbidden fruit. They would age, and with age they would die. They would feel and know pain. They would find suffering and sorrow as the weight of the years bore down on them, and they were left to toil amidst the world. In that, just as the legions of angels that had trusted in the word of Satan before them, they too would be expelled from paradise.